So imagine for a second that you are navigating this big ship across a vast, treacherous ocean. You've got a compass in your hand, right? And for your entire life, you've just trusted this compass implicitly.
Right. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's all you know.
Exactly. It points north. It tells you exactly where you are, where you're going, and really fundamentally what is true in a world that's just full of variables.
Yeah.
But then someone walks up to you, taps the glass of that compass, and tells you that the magnetic field you've been following is actually entirely artificial.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They tell you there is a second north, a true north, and the one you've been following your whole life was meticulously engineered by unseen hands to keep you basically sailing in circles.
That is a terrifying thought.
Right. Suddenly the comfort of your navigation is completely shattered. You're lost in what we could call absolute navigational muddy waters. I mean, the stars haven't changed, but your understanding of how to read them has been turned totally upside down.
Yeah, and that kind of realization, it goes far beyond just getting lost. Like, it is the absolute definition of a paradigm collapse.
Totally.
Because if your compass is wrong, then literally every map you've ever drawn based on it is also wrong. Every destination you thought you reached was actually somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, every journal entry you wrote about your journey is just based on a totally false premise.
Exactly. And that feeling of having your fundamental orientation challenge, the ground just giving way beneath your feet, that is exactly the space we are entering today.
So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our entire mission is focused on unpacking a framework that really promises to completely shatter traditional interpretations of religious devotion, of global geography, and honestly, of historical authority itself.
It's a massive topic.
It is. We are dedicating this entire time to the writings and the highly provocative theoretical framework of Dr. Khaled Waleed. Specifically, we're dissecting his concept of the dual deity, or in Arabic, al-ilahain al-ithnain.
Right. But before we take another step, we really need to set some very clear, non-negotiable ground rules for this specific exploration.
Yeah, definitely. We need to be clear about this.
Because the source material we are examining today from Dr. Khaled Waleed contains highly unorthodox, politically charged, and historically controversial claims.
Very controversial.
He completely reimagines traditional Islamic history, Judaism, the role of global superpowers, and even the very concept of sacred geography. These are not just minor tweaks to existing theology.
No, not at all.
They are foundational demolitions of widely accepted beliefs.
Right, so it is crucial to say this right up front for you listening. Our job today isn't to take a side or, endorse or validate these viewpoints.
Exactly. We are not theologians, and we're not politicians.
We are simply acting as your guides to dissect and convey the exact ideas contained in Dr. Khaled Waleed's original text. We're just exploring the fascinating intellectual architecture he has built.
Right. We are completely impartial to the claims themselves. Our focus is purely on understanding the internal logic of the arguments as they're presented in his writings.
Yeah, we're analyzing the structural integrity of Dr. Waleed's matrix. Whether you find his framework to be a profound spiritual awakening or, deeply problematic and heretical, our goal is strictly to help you understand how he constructs his arguments.
We want to look at the mechanisms he uses to justify his claims and why he believes this dual system actually exists.
Okay, let's unpack this from the ground up. We have to start at the foundational question that kicks off his entire thesis. It comes from Surah An-Nahl, chapter 16, verse 51 of the Quran,
Right.
which states, do not take two deities. Now, in a traditional context, when you hear that, you immediately picture ancient civilizations bowing down to multiple statues, right?
Yeah.
Like statues made of stone, wood, or gold.
Yeah, it's the classic textbook definition of polytheism. You have the sun god, the rain god, the god of war, all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Dr. Khaled Waleed argues that this verse is not about literal stone idols at all. He actually claims that focusing on statues is a massive distraction from something much more insidious.
Oh, a distraction. How so?
Well, he says it distracts from the adoption of dual sources in our everyday lives.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Waleed frames this concept of the two deities as a cognitive bomb meant to destroy our complacency.
Right.
He actually argues that traditional religious heritage has acted as, an anesthetic.
An anesthetic. That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, because by convincing people that idolatry is just about bowing to statues, which, let's be real, modern people rarely do the heritage, has numbed believers to the real meaning of polytheism.
So they think they're safe because they don't own a golden calf.
Exactly. According to him, polytheism is fundamentally an issue of epistemology. It is about where you derive your knowledge, your laws, and your physical orientation in the world.
Okay, that makes sense.
He calls this the danger of having an intertwined duality, or in his terminology, an izdiwajiyah in your existence.
So, if polytheism isn't about worshiping a statue of a rain god to ensure a good harvest, what is it? Let's break down Dr. Waleed's definitions of Deity 1 and Deity 2.
Let's do it.
Because if we don't understand the mechanisms of these two concepts, the rest of his geopolitical and historical arguments just won't make any sense.
Right, we need the baseline.
Let's start there. What is the first deity in his framework?
So the first deity, according to Dr. Waleed's strict definition, is the supreme ideal, the true God.
Okay.
This is the creator, the ultimate source of what he terms the spirit of the merciful, and crucially, the sole legislator of both cosmic laws like gravity or biology and covenantal laws, meaning spiritual and moral directives.
Well, that seems fairly standard for monotheism, right? God is the creator and the lawgiver.
It is standard in theory, but Dr. Waleed emphasizes the mechanism of how one interacts with this first deity.
Okay, what does that interaction look like?
The required state of being for the believer toward this first deity is absolute, uncompromised submission. It's the literal embodiment of the Quranic phrase, "You alone we worship."
Meaning no exceptions.
Zero exceptions. There is zero room for a secondary source of authority. You cannot consult God for your spiritual comfort, but then go consult a human philosopher for your moral baseline.
So it's all or nothing.
Precisely. The first deity demands an absolute monopoly on truth.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and where Dr. Waleed starts to diverge sharply from the mainstream.
Yeah, hold on tick.
Because if Deity 1 is the ultimate creator requiring absolute submission, what on earth is Deity 2?
Right.
Dr. Waleed calls this the detached peer, or the parallel source. And when I was reading his notes, my first thought was, wait, is he saying the second deity could be an ego, a political system, or even a map? How can a map be a deity?
Yeah, it sounds crazy at first, but in Dr. Waleed's framework, the second deity is literally anything that successfully competes with God's legislative or geographic authority in your mind.
Anything at all.
Anything. Let's look at the mechanism of the ego first, because it's the most intimate form of idolatry he identified.
Okay, let's break that down.
He points to the Quranic verse asking if you have seen the one who takes his own desire as his God. Dr. Waleed doesn't view this as just a metaphor for selfishness.
He takes it literally.
Yes. He views it as literal legislative polytheism. When you make a decision entirely independent of God's law, driven purely by self-interest or personal logic, your ego has successfully legislated a new law for you.
He connects us directly to the story of Satan, right?
Yeah.
Story of Satan refusing to bow to Adam.
He does, and his interpretation of that story is vital to understanding the second deity. Dr. Waleed points out that Satan's refusal to bow wasn't because he was an atheist.
Right, obviously not.
Satan wasn't denying God's existence. He was actively holding a conversation with God.
Yeah, they were literally talking.
Exactly. Satan's idolatry was his ego. God established an educational system and a hierarchy through Adam, and Satan's ego said, I have a better logic. I am made of fire. He is made of clay.
So his ego stepped in as a rival lawgiver.
Yes, Satan's ego became a parallel source of authority that competed with God's direct command.
Wow, that's a massive shift in perspective. It means you can be a devout believer in the existence of God, you can pray to God, but if your ego is the final arbiter of what you actually do in your life,
You have adopted a second deity?
you are practicing polytheism while calling yourself a monotheist.
Exactly.
But Dr. Waleed takes that a step further. He doesn't leave the second deity inside the human mind. He projects it outward into the physical and social world, pointing to alternative geographies and parallel systems of laws.
And this is where his philosophy of two, this fragmentation of belief, becomes highly structural.
Structural how?
Dr. Waleed argues that polytheism isn't the rejection of God, it is the act of sharing him.
Sharing him.
Yeah, it is attempting to balance the absolute truth with human fabrications. He calls this the duality of revelation and illusion.
I want to dig into a specific phrase he uses for this mechanism. He calls it a double dependency, or kalala muzdawicha. Break down how this double dependency operates in a person's day-to-day life according to his theory.
So the mechanism of Kalala Muzdawicha works like this. A person relies on God in their ritual prayer. They say the sacred words, they go through the physical motions of worship, and they genuinely feel a spiritual connection.
Right.
But the moment they step off the prayer rug, they rely entirely on human-made systems for their actual knowledge, their societal laws, and their geographic orientation.
Okay.
And Dr. Waleed characterizes these human-made systems as being built by the sorcerers of the children of Israel and the Arabs.
Wait, sorcerers. That sounds like literal magic. Is he talking about spells and incantations?
No, not Harry Potter magic. In Dr. Waleed's lexicon, sorcery refers to the manipulation of texts, history, and perception.
Oh, I see.
It is intellectual and theological sleight of hand. The double dependency means you have one deity for your private rituals and a completely different human-engineered deity for your reality, your politics, and your material life.
So you're splitting your existence right down the middle.
Exactly.
You're giving your spiritual lip service to the Creator, but your practical, everyday operating system is downloaded from a completely different server.
That's a great analogy.
Like a server managed by human historians, clerics, and politicians.
And Dr. Waleed argues that this split fundamentally violates the Quranic command to fear only me. In his reading, this command is actually a demand for absolute exclusivity.
So fear doesn't just mean being scared.
Right. The fear or awe isn't just about being terrified of hellfire. It means an absolute, unwavering commitment to a single epistemological path.
No parallel sources allowed.
None. It requires a complete detachment from the second deity, which practically means cutting off from fake traditions and alternative geographies. He claims that only when this duality is resolved can a person stop being a reactive follower and become what he calls a covenantal human.
Okay, so we've established the theoretical baseline. Deity 1 is the singular creator, the sole authority, demanding absolute submission.
Correct.
And Deity 2 is the parallel source, the ego, the alternative human system, the divided loyalty.
Yep, you've got it.
But Dr. Waleed doesn't leave this in the realm of abstract philosophy. He takes this theoretical framework and overlays it onto the real world.
He really does.
He maps this duality directly onto physical maps and ancient historical texts. And this brings us to the absolute core of his controversy, the matrix of the two deities.
This is where Dr. Waleed's thesis transitions from a philosophical critique of the ego into a radical geopolitical and historical reinterpretation. He applies this dual framework directly to global geography and to textual heritage.
Let's tackle the geographic aspect first, because honestly, this is undoubtedly his most explosive claim.
It is definitely the one that shocks people the most.
According to Dr. Waleed, the first deity center, the true spiritual heart of the world, is not where the vast majority of Muslims believe it to be.
No, not at all.
He claims the true geographic center is a place the Quran calls Bakka, which he identifies unequivocally as Jerusalem, and more specifically, the sanctuary of the Dome of the Rock.
Right.
He calls this the sole legitimate center for spiritual energy and divine law on earth.
And to understand the gravity of this, we have to look at the mechanism of opposition he sets up. Because in direct contrast to Jerusalem, Dr. Waleed claims that the second deity is represented geographically by Mecca in the Hijaz Desert.
The current Mecca.
Yes. He refers to it quite provocatively in his writings as the Black Cube. And he relies on historical theories suggesting that the original focal point of early Islam was actually Petra, and that the current Mecca was a much later political development.
Let's pause and make sure we clearly understand his mechanism here. How does he justify this massive geographical shift? Like, how does he argue that Mecca is a fabrication?
So Dr. Waleed leans heavily into the idea of historical displacement. He argues that during the early centuries of the Islamic Empire, specifically around the Umayyad period, political leaders really needed to consolidate power away from rival factions in the Levant.
Okay, so it was a political move.
Completely political. According to this framework, they engineered a massive geographical shift, moving the spiritual focal point deep into the desert where it could be tightly controlled.
Away from Jerusalem.
Exactly, away from the true, historically established prophetic center in Jerusalem. In Dr. Waleed's vocabulary, this desert Mecca is a mosque of mischief, an alternative geographic center explicitly built to divert human spiritual energy and focus away from the first deity's true center.
Just to highlight the sheer magnitude of what Dr. Waleed is arguing for you listening right now, he is asserting that millions of people, when they align their bodies to pray toward Mecca multiple times a day, are actually directing their spiritual compass toward the second deity.
That is exactly what he's saying.
He is redefining the holiest site in traditional Islam, a place of profound reverence, as a geographic idol constructed by human politics.
That is precisely his claim, and it is vital to understand why he thinks this matters so much. He views it as a form of geographic polytheism.
Geographic polytheism.
Yeah, his argument is that your physical orientation is inextricably linked to your spiritual orientation. If you pray to the true God with your tongue, but you physically bow toward a false center engineered by human manipulation, your worship is intercepted.
Intercepted. Wow.
It is fragmented.
Yeah.
The second deity has successfully claimed a share of your devotion.
And he mirrors this geographic duality with a textual duality. If the true geography has a false competitor, then the true text must also have a false competitor.
Yeah.
How does he break down the textual duality? What is the pure text versus the parallel text?
Well, according to Dr. Waleed, the first deity is represented purely and exclusively by the preserved text of the Quran. But he goes a step further and insists specifically on the singular Hafs reading of the Quran.
Wait, for listeners who might not be familiar with the intricacies of Quranic preservation, what is the Hafs reading and why does Dr. Waleed isolate it as the only pure text? I mean, the Quran has different accepted oral recitations, right?
Yes, traditionally, there are multiple accepted oral recitations, or qira, of the Quran. They have slight variations in pronunciation or vowelization, though mainstream scholars argue they don't change the fundamental meaning.
Right, they're seen as valid variations.
Exactly. Hafs is just the most widely distributed and common of these readings today. But Dr. Waleed completely rejects the idea of multiple valid reading.
Oh, he does.
Yes. He argues that allowing multiple readings introduces human variability into the divine word. He views the specific Hafs transmission not just as a recitation, but as an unadulterated, mathematically precise, absolute code of God.
So no room for error.
For him, any variation, even a subtle one from another reading, is a corruption.
Okay, so the first deity's text is this singular, mathematically rigid, pristine Quran. What, then, is the second deity's text?
The second deity's text is what Dr. Waleed categorizes broadly as the parallel heritage. This includes the multitude of other human readings of the Quran.
Okay.
But more significantly, it includes the vast, multi-volume collections of hadiths.
Which are the historical records.
Right, the historically recorded sayings, actions, and approvals of the Prophet Muhammad. And it also includes the extensive historical narratives and biographical literature that have built up over centuries.
Why are hadiths a problem in his framework? Because mainstream Islam relies heavily on hadiths to explain how to pray, how to fast, and how to implement the law.
Dr. Waleed argues that hadiths are inherently human historical records. Because of that, they are subject to political manipulation, memory failure, and fabrication.
Human error, basically.
Yes. The mechanism of his critique is that when believers elevate these human traditions, these historical interpretations, to a level where they dictate law alongside the Quran, they are committing legislative polytheism.
Because they're putting them on the same level as God's word.
Exactly. They are taking rules constructed by men in the centuries after the Prophet and giving them the same authoritative weight as the words of God.
Okay, so Dr. Waleed actually built a matrix to illustrate this. He has a chart that balances these two deities against each other to show the catastrophic results of this divided loyalty.
The matrix really lays it out clearly.
Let's look at what happens to a believer caught in this system. When a person's compass is pointing to the false center Mecca instead of the true center Jerusalem, how does Dr. Waleed say that impacts them practically?
The result, according to his matrix, is scattered direction.
Scattered direction.
Yeah. Dr. Waleed posits that humanity's spiritual frequency becomes fragmented. Because your mind is attempting to serve the Creator, but your physical actions and geographic orientation are tethered to a human-made illusion, you cannot achieve true spiritual focus.
You're trying to look two ways at once.
Exactly. You are in a constant state of internal static.
And once that focus is scattered, what happens when they rely on the parallel heritage instead of the pure word?
That leads to the dilution of the text, which results in legislative polytheism.
The watering down of the law.
Yes, the absolute unyielding law of God gets watered down. It becomes compromised by human opinions, cultural biases of the time the hadiths were recorded, and fabricated histories designed to support specific political dynasties.
So you're not following God, you're following history.
The believer ends up following the cultural norms of 8th century Arabs rather than the timeless law of the Creator.
Dr. Waleed then contrasts the spirit of the merciful against what he calls the energy of jinn and desire. What is the outcome of choosing the latter?
Existential polytheism. The mechanism here is really about internal navigation. If you are not guided by the pure spiritual breath of the Creator, you are inevitably guided by your own ego or by the unseen manipulative forces of society.
Which he calls jinn.
Right, he metaphorically or literally terms them jinn. It leads to a complete detachment from divine signs. You can look at the world, see the evidence of the first deity, but completely misinterpret it because your internal interpretive engine is running on the fuel of desire and societal pressure.
The final aspect of his matrix deals with lineage in whom we follow. He contrasts following Adam and the prophets with following what he calls Israel or the calf.
Yeah.
What happens, in Dr. Waleed's view, when humanity follows the calf?
They suffer the loss of the divine trust.
The divine trust, yeah.
By following the calf, which Dr. Waleed uses as a symbol for material acceleration, earthly power structures, and the pursuit of wealth over truth, humanity forfeits the true covenant.
They sell out.
They trade their eternal inheritance for short-term material gain managed by those who control the false matrix.
It's an incredibly tight, albeit radically unorthodox system he's built. I mean, think about the life of a person trapped in this matrix, according to his theory.
Oh, pretty bleak.
You are waking up, sincerely praying to God with your tongue, but you are bowing your physical body to a false, politically engineered geography. Then you go about your day making moral judgments based on a false heritage written by men centuries ago.
Right.
You think you are the ultimate monotheist, but Dr. Waleed argues you are the ultimate modern idolater. It's a terrifying thought experiment.
It really flips everything on its head.
It's worse than a computer backdoor, you know? A backdoor implies a hacker snuck in. Dr. Waleed is saying the users built the backdoor themselves, handed over the keys to the architects of the second deity, and thanked them for the security.
That is a very accurate summation of his critique. And this structural analysis naturally raises a massive logical problem.
Which is?
If this fake matrix is so obvious to someone like Dr. Waleed, and if this duality is so dangerous, why wouldn't a rational person just hedge their bets?
Like, do both.
Yeah, why not follow both? Why not revere Jerusalem and Mecca? Why not read the Quran and the Hadith?
Ah, okay. That brings us exactly to Dr. Waleed's analysis of human biology and spirituality. Specifically, his deep dive into Surah Al-Ahzab, chapter 33, verse 4.
This is a crucial part of his argument.
He argues that humans physically, biologically, cannot hedge their bets. The verse states quite simply, God has not made for any man two hearts in his interior.
And for Dr. Waleed, this is not just a passing anatomical observation about the human circulatory system.
All right, it's not a medical textbook.
No, he elevates this biological fact into a sovereign rule of consciousness.
Yeah.
He terms it the law of biological and covenantal unity.
I really appreciate how he explains the mechanics of this. He uses the analogy of a radio receiver, which I think makes the abstract theology much more grounded.
It's a very helpful analogy.
Think of your heart or your core consciousness as an antenna. A receiver can only tune into one specific frequency at a time to get a clear, coherent signal. You are either tuned to the pure frequency of 99.1 or you are tuned to 100.5. If you try to turn the dial exactly into the space between them, hoping to get the best of both stations, you don't get a beautiful mashup of music.
Oh, you definitely don't.
You just get fatal, deafening static.
And the mechanism of that static is cognitive dissonance. Dr. Waleed argues that human beings are currently trying to tune into the profound truth of Baka Jerusalem while simultaneously holding on to the historical illusion of the desert Mecca.
Trying to do both.
Exactly. Trying to process both realities through one consciousness creates a spiritual static that prevents any true divine connection.
Because the frequencies are competing.
Yes. You literally cannot have two hearts. Therefore, you cannot serve two geographic or legislative masters. The brain will eventually short-circuit or numb itself to the contradiction.
And Dr. Waleed proves this by looking at the rest of that verse from Surah Al-Ahzab, which gets into some really specific linguistic and historical tricks. The verse continues by saying that God has not made your wives your mothers.
This part is so fascinating.
Now, we need to provide some context here for you listening. In traditional Islamic law, this refers to a practice called zihar.
Right.
Explain what zihar was, because Dr. Waleed uses it as a massive lever for his theory.
So zihar was a specific pre-Islamic Arab custom regarding divorce. If a man wanted to divorce his wife, he would declare to her, "You are to me like the back of my mother."
Okay.
By equating his wife with his mother, whom he is obviously forbidden to marry, he effectively made her unlawful to him. But it left her in a suspended state where she was neither fully a wife nor free to remarry.
Just limbo.
Exactly. The Quran explicitly abolishes this practice, pointing out the absurdity of it. You cannot change the biological and legal reality of a relationship through a false verbal declaration.
Saying something doesn't make it true.
Right. Saying a wife is a mother doesn't make it true, it's just a lie.
But Dr. Waleed doesn't look at this just as ancient marital law. He applies this concept of zihar, this idea of false naming, directly to his geographic matrix. How does a divorce law apply to cities?
He scales the concept up from the interpersonal to the geopolitical. Dr. Waleed claims that Arab historical traditions attempted a massive historical zihar on geography itself.
A geographic zihar.
Yes. They tried to take the branch, the secondary location, the wife in this metaphorical structure, which he identifies as the desert Mecca, and linguistically declare it to be the mother of cities, a supreme title he insists belongs exclusively to Jerusalem.
It's an immense linguistic sleight of hand. He's saying they committed geographic zihar, they looked at a desert outpost and essentially decreed, you are now the mother of cities.
That's his claim.
But just as you can't make a wife a mother just by saying it, Dr. Waleed argues you cannot make a secondary location the center of the world just by writing it into your heritage texts. The physical and spiritual reality remains unchanged, regardless of the labels humans apply.
And he extends this analysis of false naming to the very next part of that same verse, which states, nor has he made your adopted sons your true sons.
Okay, another metaphor.
Again, historically, this addressed the legal status of adoption in 7th century Arabia. But Dr. Waleed interprets this on a macro covenantal level. He looks at who is claiming the spiritual inheritance of the earth.
So who are the adopted sons claiming the inheritance in his framework, and who are the true sons?
Dr. Waleed argues that the adopted sons refer specifically to the children of Israel, who historically and theologically claim to be the sole biological and spiritual heirs of the prophets.
The chosen people concept.
Right. He argues that this is a false claim of exclusivity, another form of linguistic manipulation. According to his reading, the true spiritual heirs, the true sons of the covenant, are those who follow the pure text and the true geography.
So it's not based on bloodline.
Not at all. He identifies these true followers as the Romans, or the universal non-tribal followers of the prophetic tradition.
So he is asserting that an entire geopolitical and religious identity, the fundamental idea of a chosen people inheriting a divine covenant by blood, is essentially a cosmic false adoption.
Yes, that's exactly what he's saying. He views the historical and political entity of Israel as a detached entity that actively tried to usurp the covenant through the distortion of texts, specifically targeting the Torah.
By writing themselves in as the main characters.
Basically, they claim to be the exclusive heirs, the true sons, when in reality, according to Dr. Waleed's mechanism of interpreting this verse, they are the adopted sons trying to legally claim an inheritance that rightly belongs only to those aligned with the first deity, regardless of their bloodline.
In the verse in Surah Al-Ahzab concludes with a devastating summary. It says, "That is just a saying of your mouths, but God says the truth."
That phrase is the linchpin of Dr. Waleed's conclusion for this entire section.
It ties it all together.
It does. The false geography of the desert Mecca, the parallel heritage of Hadith and multiple Quranic readings, the claims of biological chosenness by Israel, Dr. Waleed says none of these have any structural backing in God's reality.
They are purely verbal magic.
Yes. They are illusions sustained entirely by human fabrication, historical repetition, and political enforcement. They are literally just words from human mouths, possessing no root in the divine architecture.
Okay, so if we follow Dr. Waleed's logic to this point, that this entire dual system is a complete fabrication, a linguistic trick, an impossible attempt to tune a single radio to two competing frequencies, it begs a massive, obvious question.
I think I know where you're going with this.
If this fake matrix is just verbal magic, why does almost everyone follow the second deity? If it's fake, why is the line to bow toward the false center billions of people long?
That is the crucial question of human behavior, isn't it? And Dr. Waleed addresses it by deeply examining the illusion of the majority.
How does he explain it?
He draws heavily on Surah Yusuf, chapter 12, verse 106, which states, "And most of them believe not in God, except while they associate others with him."
That verse is a heavy hitter. It essentially states that the vast majority of people who call themselves believers are, in reality, actively practicing polytheists.
Yes. Dr. Waleed calls this the cognitive tumor of the majority.
A cognitive tumor. That's graphic.
The mechanism of this tumor is what he terms theoretical belief, but practical polytheism.
Can you break that down?
Sure. In their minds, in the abstract realm of theory, the masses believe in the Creator. But in their daily practice, in the specific direction they turn their faces to pray, in whose laws they prioritize when making business or moral decisions, they submit entirely to the architecture of the second deity.
So they say one thing but do another.
They theoretically love the first deity, but they practically obey the second.
And he has a very sharp, almost brutal critique of why the masses do this. He doesn't sugarcoat his view of the general public at all.
No, he is very direct.
He explicitly compares the blindly following masses to a panting dog. Now, I have to push back hard here. Using the Arabic term al-kalb al-lahif, the panting dog, to describe billions of earnest believers is an incredibly harsh, almost insulting metaphor.
It's definitely provocative.
Does insulting billions of people actually serve his theological argument? Or is this just a form of intellectual elitism? How does he justify that level of contempt for the average person?
It is an intentionally shocking and aggressive metaphor designed to shake the reader. But Dr. Waleed justifies it within the strict confines of his theoretical framework.
How so?
He argues that the metaphor of the panting dog, which is actually drawn from a different Quranic verse, perfectly describes the psychological state of blind followers.
In what way?
A dog pants, whether you burden it with a heavy load or whether you leave it completely alone, right? Its panting is a state of constant, unthinking reactivity to its environment, not a reasoned choice.
Okay.
Dr. Waleed argues that the masses merely accept the traditions of their forefathers and the decrees of religious clerics without ever applying critical thought. They are purely reactive.
So he's saying they're running endlessly on a treadmill of heritage, exhausting themselves with rituals and arguments without ever stopping to ask who actually built the treadmill or where it's plugged in.
Precisely. Dr. Waleed views the majority not as evil, but as profound victims of a massive historical deception orchestrated by what he categorizes as jinn and Israel.
The architects of the false system.
Right. He argues that the masses have been systematically manipulated into choosing material acceleration, earthly power, and psychological comfort over divine truth.
The easy path.
He symbolizes this choice as worshiping the calf, directly referencing the biblical and Quranic story of the golden calf worshipped by the Israelites in the desert while Moses was away.
Right, the classic story of idolatry.
The masses choose the visible, tangible golden calf that they can see and touch over the invisible, demanding truth of the first deity.
Because it's always easier to worship the gold you can touch than the abstract law you have to obey. A golden calf doesn't ask you to change your behavior, it just asks you to admire it.
Exactly. It's safe.
But it's not just about the comfort of the familiar, is it? Dr. Waleed also highlights a massive fear factor that keeps people locked in the matrix. When he looks at the Quranic command to fear only me, he flips the lens to examine what people are actually afraid of today.
And the mechanism of control isn't just tradition, it's active intimidation.
Intimidation?
Yes. Dr. Waleed observes that people are terrified of abandoning the second deity because the systems that uphold it are incredibly powerful in the material, physical world.
Like political powers.
He notes that people fear modern superpowers. Historically, he points to the Sassanid Empire, and in the modern context, he explicitly names America and Israel. In his framework, these powerful geopolitical entities actively protect and enforce the parallel heritage and the false geography.
Because if you step out of line, if you stand up and publicly reject the second deity, if you say the geography is fake and the heritage is fabricated, you don't just lose an argument.
No, the stakes are much higher.
You lose your social standing. You lose your political protection. You might lose your job or your community. You become a total outcast.
Exactly. And so the awe, the reverence, the fear that should be reserved entirely and exclusively for the first deity is forcefully redirected toward earthly superpowers and the safety of societal consensus.
They're bowing to peer pressure and political might.
People submit to the false matrix not because they deeply believe in its theological purity, but because the matrix controls the weapons, the money, and the social capital.
That makes a lot of sense from a sociological perspective.
This, according to Dr. Waleed, is the ultimate manifestation of practical polytheism. You are serving the systems that claim to speak for God out of fear of the material consequences of dissent.
This brings us to a really intense pivot in his framework. We've mapped out the matrix of the two deities. We've diagnosed the cognitive tumor and the practical polytheism of the majority.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We've looked at the biological impossibility of holding two truths and the sheer terror that keeps people conforming. But where is all of this heading? Dr. Waleed isn't just describing a static system. He's describing a system under pressure.
Building toward a breaking point.
How does this massive, deeply entrenched, globally enforced system of the second deity finally fall? This leads us to his radical redefinition of the Day of Judgment.
This is perhaps one of the most intellectually stimulating and surprisingly optimistic parts of his thesis.
Optimistic? How so?
Typically, when the average person hears the phrase Day of Judgment or Yom Adin in Arabic, they immediately think of a distant, apocalyptic future event.
Fire and brimstone.
Right. They picture the literal end of the physical world, the skies rolling up like scrolls, the mountains crumbling into dust, fire raining down. But Dr. Waleed redefines this concept completely, shifting it from a physical apocalypse to a cognitive one.
He views the Day of Judgment as a covenantal entitlement that begins right now with awareness. It's not an event you wait for, it's a state you enter. It's a cognitive awakening, not a Hollywood apocalypse.
The mechanism of this Day of Judgment, in Dr. Waleed's framework, is a process of cognitive collapse for the false paradigm. It is the specific historical moment when the moral idols finally fall.
He introduces the fascinating concept of the reverse detachment. We talked earlier about how the false systems, the architects of the second deity, detached from the pure truth to build their own empires.
Right, the initial detachment.
But on this day of cognitive awakening, the dynamic flips. The leaders of the false paradigm, the celebrity clerics, the politicians, the scholars who upheld the fake geography, will actually detach from their own followers.
Yes, he relies on the Quranic concept where, on the day of reckoning, those who are followed as leaders will completely disown the masses who blindly followed them.
Just abandon them.
The calf and the traditional clerics, when finally faced with the undeniable, blazing reality of the first deity's truth, will simply abandon their posts. They will claim they never forced anyone to follow them.
That's brutal.
The panting dogs, the masses who outsource their critical thinking, will suddenly be left without a master, holding the bag for their practical polytheism. It is a profound psychological and spiritual betrayal for those who trusted human heritage over the pure word.
And then Dr. Waleed brings back the imagery of the golden calf to explain how this system is finally destroyed. In the original biblical and Quranic story, Moses doesn't just yell at the Israelites for worshiping the golden calf.
No, he takes physical action.
He physically burns the calf, grinds it into powder, and scatters its ashes into the sea so it can never be worshipped again. Dr. Waleed takes this literal historical event and turns it into a powerful mechanism for our current time.
It's a great metaphor.
But how do you burn a false geography? I mean, you can't set fire to a concept. How do you burn a parallel heritage made of millions of books?
You burn it with knowledge.
Knowledge is the fire.
Yes. The mechanism of destruction isn't physical fire, it is epistemological fire. The second deity, the alternative geography at the desert Mecca, the volumes of hadith, the traditions that uphold the false matrix will be burned by the unrelenting dissemination of truth.
This is where Dr. Waleed inserts his own work into the cosmic timeline, doesn't he?
He does very explicitly.
He literally claims that the very knowledge he is presenting, this entire theoretical framework of the dual deity that we were discussing right now, is the fire.
That's right.
It is the intellectual fire that burns away the false sanctity of the desert Mecca in the minds of believers. Because once you see the matrix, once you understand the linguistic tricks of Zihar and the historical displacement, you can't unsee it.
The illusion is broken.
The illusion burns away in your consciousness, and your spiritual compass is forcefully, violently redirected back to the true, original school of Jerusalem.
He specifically calls this the fire of truth, and he contrasts it beautifully with what he calls the red breath, or the spirit of the merciful.
The red breath.
Yeah, the fire must come first to destroy the illusion and clear the cognitive static. Once the false matrix is burned away, the pure spirit, the red breath, can finally elevate the believer.
Like a phoenix rising from the ashes of the fake matrix.
Exactly. And to illustrate this ultimate systemic victory, Dr. Waleed presents a final chart, a matrix of cosmic transformation. It maps out the reality of the world before this cognitive awakening compared to the reality of the world after it.
Let's walk through the mechanisms of this final matrix, because this is his ultimate vision of the endgame for humanity. According to Dr. Waleed, before the awakening, humanity is stuck with two qiblas, two directions of prayer, a divided attention, constantly suffering from spiritual static, After the awakening.
After the awakening, there is an exclusive, laser-focused orientation toward Jerusalem. The compass is finally fixed.
The single heart.
The biological rule is satisfied. The single heart is tuned to the single, pure frequency of the first deity. The static is entirely gone.
Before the awakening, there is a deep systemic dependence on what he calls the sorcerers of the Arabs in Israel, the human custodians who manage the false heritage and the false geography. After the awakening.
Absolute trust in God alone, the double dependency we talked about earlier, is completely severed.
No more parallel sources.
Humanity stops relying on the historical interpretations of fallible men and relies entirely and exclusively on the mathematically pure text of the Creator.
Before the awakening, humanity is endlessly chasing green materialism, the earthly power, the wealth, and the comfort symbolized by the calf. They are stuck in a horizontal pursuit of stuff. After.
Ascending via the red breath, the true spirit of the merciful, the mechanism shifts from horizontal, earthly accumulation and geopolitical dominance to vertical, spiritual ascension and true covenantal fulfillment.
And finally, before the awakening, the world is operating under the heavy, terrifying authority of global superpowers. He lists America and the modern equivalents of the Sassanids, who protect the second deity and enforce the matrix through fear, and after the cosmic transformation.
The false matrix of political and military power just dissolves. Sovereignty returns entirely to what he identifies as the victorious party of God, aligning with the Romans, or the true, universal, monotheistic followers of the prophetic legacy.
The fear is gone.
The fear of earthly superpowers vanishes in the face of absolute, recognized, divine sovereignty.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, navigating your own life? If we synthesize the absolute core of Dr. Khaled Waleed's monumental thesis, he is arguing that true monotheism isn't just a passive statement of belief in one creator.
It's definitely not passive.
It's not just a box you check on a census form or a phrase you mumble during a ritual. True monotheism requires violent cognitive action.
Active destruction of idols.
It requires actively identifying and intentionally shattering the second deity in your own life. Whether that second deity is a false geographical center you've been culturally conditioned to revere, a human-made religious tradition that dilutes and complicates the pure divine word, or a deep-seated subservience to modern political superpowers out of fear of losing your social standing.
You have to audit your life.
According to Dr. Waleed, it means fundamentally auditing your own sources of truth and asking the most dangerous question, who programmed my compass?
And this raises a final, vital point for consideration that extends even beyond Dr. Waleed's specific theological and historical arguments.
What's that?
Well, Dr. Waleed forcefully argues that the heart is a receiver that can only tune to one frequency. He applies this strictly to theology and sacred geography. But if we extract that mechanism and apply it to our broader modern information age...
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
Are we, as a global society, constantly trying to force our minds to tune into the conflicting frequencies of deep, meaningful truth and shallow, material distractions simultaneously?
Definitely.
We try to consume profound philosophy while scrolling through targeted advertisements, and if so, is the constant, exhausting anxiety, the mental static we hear in our everyday lives, simply the sound of that impossible duality?
A compass pointing in two directions will only ever guarantee that you stay perpetually lost. Thank you for joining us for this intensely thought-provoking deep dive into the mind, the mechanisms, and the matrix of Dr. Khaled Waleed. Keep questioning your maps, keep ruthlessly auditing your sources, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.